The first time I saw a focus competition style heel, it floored me. It hit me like a freight train. It made me think like, man, I have been training dogs wrong. That sent me on a 20-year journey, and I want to share that with you because it will completely change the way you train your dog. I'm Jeff, the owner of Paradigm Canine here in Columbus, Ohio. I've been a dog trainer for over 20 years, and this following is my story. I have notes up here on my computer because this is 20 years of stuff that I went through, and I don't want to ramble. I want to try to stay on track, but I want to walk you through my journey from a dumb high school kid who got a dog against his parents' instructions and wishes, and all the way through my learning process and how I evolved to be the trainer that I am today. So let's rewind back to 2005. I was 17 in my second semester of high school. I ended up getting a boxer from Petland, the worst place you could get a dog. But it happened. I got talked into it by a girl. Story of my life. And I fell in love with the dog. My mom said no. So me being the person that I am, I got her anyways. And I was able to somehow sneak her into my house for a total of 2 weeks. My parents were probably wondering why all of a sudden I was doing laundry, because I would come home, leave her in my truck, run inside, get a laundry basket, throw like a comforter or a pile of clothes in it, and then go downstairs, put her in the basket, cover her up, and then walk upstairs to my room. And I would get up really early before the next day. I had a friend's mom who would watch her for me when I would go to school. That didn't last very long. She got tired of waking up early. And then after a couple of weeks, I had left her in my bedroom while I went to go take a shower, and my mom heard her whining, so I got busted. She told me that she knew she wasn't going to be able to stop me from doing anything at this point in my life. I was a hardhead. But she did say that I could not leave a non-potty trained puppy in the house alone. She was a writer. She worked from home. She didn't want to deal with it. I understand. So I was forced to kind of find someone to watch her, which didn't work very good. I almost failed my senior year. I missed something outrageous, like 50 or 60 days. You're supposed to fail after 24, but I would go in after school, let the teachers play with the puppy, get the homework for the day, and I went home and I would do it. So I stayed on track, and luckily my teachers liked me, so they let it slide. I still have no idea how I graduated high school. But she got to, again, this is a young puppy, and I didn't know what I was doing at all. I just wanted a boxer. Ever since I was a little kid, I saw one when I was playing soccer. I got a boxer, and now I don't know what to do with her. She's being a 6-month-old boxer puppy. Just out of control, outrageous, overly hyper. And my mom says to me, you need to get that dog trained. So I start looking into training, and keep in mind, I'm graduated from high school now at this point. I'm 18. I have no idea what I'm doing with my life. Nothing. I found a local dog training school, and a light bulb just kind of went on. I always liked animals. I always when I was a little kid, I wanted to be a zookeeper or biologist, and I would, binge watch Shark Week and daydream about being a marine biologist out on a boat and researching animals and things. And I thought, well, maybe I will just be the dog trainer, and I will train her. So I somehow talked my dad into loaning me the money. We didn't have a lot of money. I think he took equity out of the home to do this, but he was probably just happy that I had some direction at all, and I wasn't just floundering. He probably would have just wanted me out of the house, honestly. So I went to the dog training school, and this was my first exposure to dog training. I had no idea the world I was getting into. I had no idea the blacks and the whites, the extreme, all positive this, traditional this, balance. I didn't know any of this stuff. And so the dog training school that I went to was heavily influenced and based around the old Kohler method of dog training, which if you know anything about dog training, if you don't know anything about dog training, you have no idea what I'm saying. I'll explain. But for those of you that do know, a lot of critics of it, they would call it crank and yank type of training. And it's still used to this day. The original, I guess they're a company now, the family, they still have I believe they have a dog training school, and they still teach it in the same fashion because it does work, but there are downsides. And I found that out very quick, what the limitations were when I got out, and I got my first dog training client, paying client, was a pug. And I learned very quickly, I cannot bully or intimidate a pug into doing what I want it to do. I made it work through a lot of improvising. I can't talk. Through a lot of improvisation. Is that a word? Improvisation? It is now. I got the dog trained. The owners were extremely happy, but I felt like the whole time, I was calling the dog stubborn and working through its stubbornness because it didn't want to do it. Little did I know stubbornness is just another word for lack of motivation. We'll circle back to that later. So after training that pug, that sent me on a little bit of a journey. I had no direction. I knew at this point I didn't know enough. They call it the Dunning-Kruger effect. Essentially, when you first learn something new, if you don't know anything at all, your confidence is at zero because you're ignorant. You don't know anything. Once you start learning a little, your confidence skyrockets. And this is kind of where I was after going through the dog training school. I knew just enough to be stupid. They call this the peak of Mount Stupid. That's where I was at. And then you get a little bit more experience and your confidence starts to plummet. And that's because you start realizing, as I did, I don't know what I don't know. There's a lot of depth out there to this, and I was standing on the tip of the iceberg thinking I was seeing the whole thing. And so it humbled me, and I'm thankful that I got humbled that fast because the dog training industry is full of people that they get to a certain point of confidence level and ability and knowledge, and they just stay there, and they never get better. This is how I've always done it. This is the way it works. Every new innovative trainer out there is full of it, regardless of the results they're getting. They're overcomplicating it or whatever. Stick in the mud type of mindset that a lot of people have, and this is true of probably most industries, just very prevalent in the dog training industry. The joke we use in the dog training industry is that the only two things that two dog trainers can agree with is that the third one is wrong. That holds true everywhere I've been. But during that time, I read every book I could find. I watched every video, consumed every resource I could find online and in print, and I learned from both sides of the spectrum. From the all positives and their ability to create motivation and to teach, without using any pressure or anything. Also the other side where, how and when to use aversives and when to punish behavior and things like that. And this is when I discovered that I went through a very similar journey to a lot of dog trainers that are out there. And there was already, a segment of dog training that started calling themselves balanced trainers. And that's a topic for a bigger video because I believe that term got hijacked. And most balanced trainers aren't actually balanced, but that's neither here nor there. We'll talk about that in a future video. At this time, while I was learning as much as I could, my business was struggling. Business, meaning I had 0 clients. I didn't even have a business. I had business cards is what I had. And I would hand them out to everybody I would see, and nobody called me because I was a dumb 18, 19-year-old. I didn't have a beard yet. Nobody took me serious. So I called the local invisible fence company, and I ended up getting a job there. And I worked there for a couple years to the point of boredom. It turns out there's only so much make a dog afraid of a flag that I can do before I lose my mind. So I got burned out on that. But it was extremely beneficial, though, and I didn't fully appreciate it at the time, but the sheer amount and types of dogs I got to work with. I mean, the principles that I was using were still there. I just didn't know what I was doing, like why I was doing what I was doing. What I was doing was working. Where, teaching a dog to be happy and comfortable outside and only be afraid of this one thing, to teach them like that, this is safe and this is not safe. I didn't understand the psychology behind that at the time, but I was doing it and I was seeing how it worked. So that when I learned more later and I think back on that, I was doing things in a correct way because I'd never had the dogs that they called the porch puppies, which is obnoxious. You have a cutesy term for a dog that you traumatize because your training sucks. But I digress there as well. I could run off on that tangent for a while. But after a couple years, I kind Got burned out on that. I gave up on dog training as a full-time gig. I took a steady job somewhere else, and I just did training on the side, kind of as a side gig for friends, family, and the occasional client. And you just use it as, kind of a laboratory where I would start to apply some of these new principles that I was learning and kind of feel them out, see how they work, tweak things. I was working on me and my skills kind of before I decided to actually have a business and try to be a professional dog trainer again. I correctly assumed I should be really, really good at training dogs, which, to be fair, I was, but it was a two-dimensional type of training dogs. I was only training through pressure and punishment, and some motivational speak for rewards, which turns out is really just an apology for correcting you. We'll get into that in future videos as well. But the light bulb moment for me, because I was getting burned out after a couple years at this other just regular day-to-day job I was working, and I was learning more, getting more confident, starting to think about it. But then I had a really light bulb moment. I don't know where it was, I don't know when it was, but I remember it like vividly seeing a beautiful German Shepherd in a picture perfect focus competition style heel, and I just thought, like, what the heck is that? You can do that? And I really thought to myself, like, I'm doing something wrong. I have to figure out how to do that. And that sent me on a journey. If I thought the pug started off this 20-year journey, which it technically did, I was unfocused. I didn't have a direction. I was just consuming everything. When I saw that gave me a direction. I had to figure out how people were able to do that. And this was the epiphany that I had with all this research that I did, where I started dipping into the sport world. And I've never formally got into dog sports. That just wasn't in the cards for me at that point in my life where I was. But I learned everything I could from people that were doing it, and I started taking those lessons and applying them to what I was doing. In fact, I'm just now at a place in my life where I can start to dip my toes into the actual sport world, more for me as a hobby, not for a business. Around that same time was when my wife and I were living in a sketchy 2-bedroom apartment, drug dealer neighbors and everything. My wife got chased by a police helicopter one night when she was taking the dogs out to go to the bathroom, got a spotlight shown on her. I think that was our wake-up call to get out of there. But we were living in this 2-bedroom apartment, and I had $700 in my account, and I took a huge leap of faith and just went all in. And I used some of that money to start or build my own website. I created some training programs, and what I did, like, I was confident at this point, like, what I could do, but I needed to find a way to support that financially and really just get clients. So I posted on every single Facebook community page I could find. I was charging like $700 for off-leash training back then. And to my surprise, I didn't get a ton, but I got enough. I was ecstatic. Like, I will never forget the day that I looked at my wife because I was looking at my schedule for the following week. This was a Sunday, and Monday through Friday, I had one appointment every single day. And I looked at her and I said, Aaron, I have something to do with dog training 5 whole days this week. That I know it was only one appointment a day, but that was a big deal for me. That was an entire work week where I actually felt like I had a job as a dog trainer. I actually felt like a professional dog trainer. It was a huge, huge confidence boost. And applying these new lessons and everything that I had learned from the years of reading and watching and practicing, and then applying them to these new dog training clients that I was blowing people away. Like, I had one lady tell me, she's like, I know I'm your client, and I probably shouldn't tell you this, but you need to raise your prices. I had another client tell me that I'm the best dog trainer that nobody's ever heard of, and I didn't know whether to take that as a compliment or an insult, but I choose to take it as a compliment. The point is that, and I'm not trying to toot my own horn or anything here, because I'm not. It's not about me in particular. It's about the system that I was using. And you're going to hear me say this over and over and over again on this channel. It is more important how you teach, how you train, than what you train. If you start with motivation and then teaching before you apply pressure and consequences, everything changes. And that's what I was finding out. And at this point, I'm still like just doing in-home training, can't do board trains yet. So I was still using it as a lot of experimentation. Let me try this, see how this works. Let me see when I can apply pressure, how much pressure to apply, I didn't teach that well enough. Let me go back and rebuild motivation before I start making them do it around distractions. I was getting better and better and better. And any good dog trainer will tell you this, like you should always be a student. Never assume you know everything. There's always more stuff to learn. You can always be better. If you start thinking you know everything, you are going to get slapped with a dog that throws everything off. And if you're not really good at the principles behind why you're doing what you're doing, you're going to struggle. So after my wife and I got out of the 2-bedroom apartment, we got our first home. Now is when I started to really feel like I made it. It was a little 1,200 square foot standalone condo. Not a whole lot of room, but we didn't have kids yet. It was just my wife and I and our 2 dogs, and I started doing board and trains, just 1 to 2 dogs at a time for the most part. Occasionally I had a third, and that felt super crowded in that small house, so I really kept it to 1 or 2, plus still the private in-home lessons that I was doing. That condo really helped the business take a leap forward, though. The results we were getting there were killer. And I attribute that partially to the new system I was using, but also to the sheer amount of passive training that I was able to give the dogs. It turns out that when you're training the dogs in and around a normal home environment versus a sterile training facility where they're going to learn how to do the commands inside and then do them outside and then do them around like dogs as distractions or whatever, and that's it. And then when those dogs go home to their living room, it's harder for the owners to get the dog to adapt to that skill set and that rule set in their home when they were only used to performing that way at the trainer's location. Whereas what we were doing was essentially transferring the dog from my living room to their living room, and it just felt like a Tuesday because I only trained a couple dogs at a time. Whenever I was home, the dogs had once we had their training to a point where we could enforce rules, they could just be out and just passively be existing. But if they stepped out of line because of the training we had, I could say, nope, don't do that, do this instead. And we could teach them their left and right boundaries, so to speak. And that's why I call it passive training. I'm not in there doing a training session, throwing commands at the dog. I'm just giving them enough rope to hang themselves with, basically. I'm allowing them to kind of explore what their boundaries are. I'm just there to guide them back into the lane, so to speak. I call it bumper bowling sometimes. Like, I'm the bumpers, and the dog is put in this lane, and anytime they go out of it, I'm just going to bounce you right back in it. And they learn pretty quick what their rules are that way. But with the success I was seeing there came a whole new problem. A good problem to have, I guess, for me, but not so good for my clients. At one point, I was booked out almost a year ahead of time, which was truly humbling that someone would be willing to wait that long to get the results that I was producing. So I knew something had to change. Like, in addition to that, I was consistently and readily taking dogs that other trainers failed to have success with because of behavioral issues, or dogs that other trainers wouldn't even touch. Like some really, really, really like human and dog aggressive dogs, horrific separation anxiety, things that are really difficult. I'd bring it on. I love it. I mean, it's exhausting emotionally and physically sometimes, but those are the results that really that really stick out in your mind. You don't tend to remember the easy dogs as much as you do the ones that you went through a journey with. So, but those dogs, they cannot wait that long to get into training. Like they need help often, like right away. So fast forward to present day, we moved again. I didn't get the house on a lot of acreage where I could have an outbuilding for the business and things that, the daydream that most dog trainers have. But little did I know I was getting something better. I mean, this house was a construction project. There were no floors. We couldn't move in initially because there was so much work to do. But it had a walkout basement that was finished at one point. That was, I mean, it was trashed when we moved in. But with a lot of blood, sweat, and tears, a lot of hard work and elbow grease, we built something really cool. We essentially turned the basement, the walkout basement, into a training facility in my home. So we have a big empty training room where we can train the dogs with no distractions. We have a safe, comfortable, clean kennel room where they stay when they're not with us. But we also have just a normal home family environment upstairs. So the dogs still get the benefit of all that passive training that we were doing at the condo. Like, not arguably, actually more here, because my wife and I now have 3 children. So talk about a distraction-rich environment to train dogs around and teach them to behave around. It's as real as it gets. So we have a shorter wait list. I'm able to train more dogs at a time. I have space to board dogs that we've already trained from previous clients. So when they go on vacation or they want a tune-up. But at this day, and this is 20 years later, I'm still constantly refining what we do. A big part of what I do as well, and part of the journey that I've gone on, is learning how to not just train the dogs, but also how to coach the owners. Every dog trainer talks about, how you have to train the human too, and that's very, very true, but very little do it, I believe, or at least don't do it very effectively. I would say that the owner education that we do is easily 60 to 70% of the job. And I'm really proud of how well we do it, because that is what keeps dogs in the home, is teaching the owners how to use the training and troubleshoot on their own and problem solve so they can do this stuff without me. That's really what I'm most proud of. That's, if an owner is winning with their dog over time, it's because of the efforts they're putting in. I'm only jump starting it for them and helping them on that journey and teaching them how to do it. They're the ones putting in the work. So I'm really, really proud of all my clients and what we built with that. So if you want to take something away from the 20 years of lessons that I have in this industry and with training dogs, it should be this: motivation is everything in dog training. Motivate your dog, build a relationship first, teach them what you want them to do before you ever think about teaching them what not to do. If you want to train your dog the way that I wish someone taught me to when I was 18, stick around, give us a subscribe. I'm going to be teaching you my entire training process going forward in this channel. Happy training, guys.